Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ namassa. This morning after the meal, someone asked a question about how do the Four Noble Truths relate to the Noble Eightfold Path? And I answered that roughly speaking, the Noble Eightfold Path is a set of things to do, actions of body, speech, and mind, specifying what are skillful actions of body, speech, and mind, and that the Four Noble Truths are a framework in which those actions need to be held in order to realize their full potential. Now, they're actually more connected than that, because the fourth noble truth is the path to the cessation of suffering, is explained as precisely the Noble Eightfold Path. And one of the two typical explanations of the first step in the Noble Eightfold Path, right view, is explained as view in terms of understanding suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. So you could also say that they're actually quite inseparable. You can't pick up one without the other. It's a very, very well conceived framework. And in our readings, we've been talking about Satipatthana, so that reading from Joseph Goldstein primarily about the last three factors of the Noble Eightfold Path: right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi. And so I thought I'd talk a bit more tonight about the views, right view, and the framework for these actions. Because again, even if you do a pretty good job on the actions, without the framework, without the framework, one does not realize their full potential. And so the Buddha has quite a bit to say about views. And the first thing that I think is very helpful to recollect is that whatever your view is, it's conditioned. So many people cause so many problems because they believe that, well, the sole condition for their belief is that it's true. And they can't understand why someone else would believe something different, and therefore there must be something wrong with them. This causes massive suffering. the Buddha explains things very differently. He says I think it's in a pair of suttas in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Twos. There are two causes for the arising of wrong view. The voice of another, in other words, hearing someone say something, or one's own unskillful reflection. And there are two causes for the arising of right view: the voice of another and one's own skillful reflection. And so, whatever you believe, it's caused. It's not, and if your life experience had been different, you might believe something else. This is massively freeing, because it means that in some ways beliefs have a whole lot less significance than we think they do. Do you believe in ghosts? Well, if you're Thai, your parents have told you ghost stories since you're a little child, and you might well believe in ghosts. If your parents are, materialist biologists, you probably don't. And the Buddha, as I understand the Buddha's teachings, and the fundamentals of the fundamentals of practicing the Buddha's teachings don't depend on the details of those sorts of beliefs. There's some, I was listening to my teacher Ajahn Kaccana saying, whether you perceive the world in terms of, the question was, some Buddhist teacher says that some of our thoughts are caused by other beings. What do you think about this? And Ajahn Kaccana said, well, basically, some people perceive the world that way. Other people perceive the world primarily in terms of psychology. Either way, the fundamental practice of the Buddha's teachings is the same. It's not, and so not really trying too hard to change one's views about this or to change other people's views. I imagine most people here have learned through experience that trying to change other people's views is suffering. So we start there. And in terms of right view, the simplest explanation of right view is that view that leads to the cessation of dukkha. So, that's the primary point. The Buddha is actually not, in the Pali Canon, it's really remarkable. The Buddha's not trying to teach a worldview. He's, you don't get a totally coherent worldview. He's not saying, this is the way the world is. Saying this is what you do in order to put an end to suffering. And he said basically, I understand a whole lot more about the world than I teach, but I don't teach it because it isn't helpful. I teach what's helpful. And the Buddha was also very clear that what is helpful is also always true. But at the same time, what shall we say? I would say that, my familiarity with quantum mechanics indicates that, trying to say what even the physical world is very difficult. Much less the Buddha's world, which comprises both the physical and mental perspectives. And so seemingly contradictory statements may actually not be so. Or things that seem obvious may on more careful inspection be not so. And so again, some humility is in store. But again, right view is that which leads towards the cessation of suffering. And roughly speaking, there are two forms of right view. The later commentaries call them mundane, which means sort of worldly, and supra-mundane, beyond the world. And just in outline form, the mundane right view is primarily about the ethical effects of action, karma, and the supra-mundane right view is what I mentioned earlier, seeing the understanding in terms of suffering, the cessation of suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. So starting with mundane, the standard definition. Like so many of these things, it's a formula. It needs some unpacking. I'll see how well I can do. I had it memorized at one point. So there is what is given, what is offered, what is sacrificed. There are fruits and results of good and bad actions. There is mother, there is father. There is this world, there is the other world. There are spontaneously reborn beings. There are good and wise ascetics and Brahmins who having known and fared rightly proclaim this world and the other world. I think I've got that about 80% right. And so it's a formula, and there's a lot there. And as usual in the Buddha's formulas, it goes from things which are sort of easier to grasp towards things that are more difficult. In the Buddha's teachings, he recognized he was teaching people who had differing degrees of faith in him and differing spiritual capacities. So he would usually begin with things which are simpler and then work up, because he recognized he'd lose bits of his audience at different points. So it's a good teaching strategy. And so there is what is given, what is offered, what is sacrificed is basically there are results of generosity. Generosity has positive results. And I think, if I remember right, there were other philosophers in the Buddha's time who asserted the opposite. Basically, giving or any actions don't have results. Basically, whatever you do, the world will unfold in exactly the same way. And the Buddha said that was the most pernicious view possible, because it meant that basically, if that's what you believe, then your actions have no effect, and your future is just predestined, and basically you can do anything you want, and then what happens to you is going to be random. So I think someone who really acted according to those views would end up mentally ill, because it just, and it's not what we see at all. I mean, what we do, if you smile at someone and speak nicely to them, the reaction would be different if you scowl and speak angrily at them. We know that. And in some ways, yeah, that's an important thing to notice. But what the Buddha says is that it's more, the Buddha suggests that that's not just a principle of human psychology. It's a sort of pillar of the way the world operates, which is not obvious. But that's what mundane right view indicates. So continuing on, there is mother, there is father. Again, this is the statement that we have a very special relationship with our families. And yeah, the connection is very strong. And yeah, and going back to there is what is given, what is offered, what is sacrificed. Well, our parents have sacrificed a lot for us. And we in turn, if we are skillful, will recognize that giving to our parents and supporting them nourishes our own hearts and is deeply meaningful. And so this bond that we didn't, unlike the way some devas are said to be born from lotus flowers without parents, but that's not how it works for us. Every one of us has parents, and our parents have left, and even when we're not with them, in a way it's like they're with us, because so much of our character, if we had parents who were generally good people, yeah, we feel that. If we've had challenges with our parents, we feel that. And however it's been, it is a special relationship. It should, to be a really full human being, we need to recognize that and respond to whatever situation we have with our parents in a skillful way. And there's no formula for that, but it's something we need to do. Then, continuing, there are fruits and results of good and bad actions. This is what I was alluding to earlier. So this is probably the central. It sits right in the middle of the formula for mundane right view, and it could be considered the summary of the whole thing. As I mentioned before, this quality, the results of intentional actions it has power. And the power is not just at the human psychological level, but at the sort of fundamental way the world works. There is this world, there is the other world. This is a sense that, that basically, according to mundane right view, experience does not end at death. Notice the Buddha doesn't go into detail here. That's quite deliberate, because the mundane right view, it's absolutely, he's trying to state what's absolutely necessary rather than going into lots of details. I don't think I mentioned at the beginning, but my understanding of mundane right view is the Buddha says, if to the extent that you can adopt this view, your Dhamma practice will be that much more fruitful. This is what gives power to it. If people have read the biography of Lumpur Cha, I don't think there's any way he could have sort of put his whole life on the line for the Dhamma practice. And his understanding of it was that if I don't realize the truth this time, I'm just going to have to do it again another time. He could see, he experienced the death of his father. He thought, wow, I don't want to keep doing that again and again. And so I wouldn't say fearless. He felt fear and he faced fear. And it was, again, I think he could only do it because he had this view. Again, that doesn't mean if causes don't allow you to adopt this view, that doesn't mean you can't benefit from the Buddha's practice. But I don't think you'll have Ajahn Chah's passion either. That's just how it is. So yeah, experience doesn't end with death, and whatever, just like in this life, intentional actions have results. So skillful actions have positive results. Actions based on the mental qualities of renunciation, goodwill, and compassion have positive results. Actions based on the mental factors of greed, of ill will, and of cruelty have negative results, both in this life and experience after this life. There are spontaneously reborn beings is a little bit of an addition, but it's just there, I guess, suggesting that that the power of our, human beings are born and animals are born from physical causes. But the Buddha suggests that there are beings which are born simply out of the strength of intention, either positive or negative. And again, whether they're born out of lotuses or not, I don't know. That's not specified and doesn't really matter. But there is a sense that, intention is enough to bring being into effect. And then the last one, there are in the world ascetics and Brahmins who knowing rightly and faring rightly proclaim this world and the next. This is also central to the spiritual path. There's other people who have understood this. We don't have to do all the work ourselves. We can learn from people. There are people who know more than I do about this, is more or less what that says. And of course, the idea is, well, why don't I seek them out and see what they have to say? And so this is, again, if you don't believe that anyone knows, then you have to sort of figure this all out for yourself, which the Buddha did that, but it's very, very daunting. Most of us do not have those spiritual capacities. We need help from spiritual friends, kalyanamitta, people who have walked the path and can point the way. And so again, as I mentioned earlier, whether we have these views or not is due to causes and conditions, and some we can change, some we can't. But just to recognize, the Buddha says, if you really want to make the spiritual life, if you have these beliefs, the spiritual life will naturally be the center of your attention. It'll be the most important thing for you. If you have other beliefs, then it may be a bit sidelined. And again, we just work with whatever beliefs we've got. The Buddha was willing to teach everybody. And yeah, so those are some words about mundane right view. And then, the transcendent or supra-mundane right view has to do with the Four Noble Truths. And you note that the statements, the way that mundane right view is described, is entirely in terms of self and world. It mentions parents, and it mentions parents and parents of this world, the next world, beings who are reborn spontaneously, and beings who might be capable and worthy of being our teachers. And of course, so that's all in terms of self and other, and in terms of action. There's a sense that if I'm a person, I do intentional actions, and I receive the results of those actions. And so that's all in terms of self and world. And the Buddha said that that's skillful. The Buddha never insists that he never takes not self to be categorically skillful. Like in all situations, you should bring up the recollection. There is no self here. Nope. That the Buddha never said that. And if you try it, again, I don't recommend it. It's unskillful. You have to wake up and go into the work in the morning. There's no self here. Why do I need to get up? Go tell that to your boss. I'm not actually here, so I don't actually have to do my work. Your boss won't buy it, and your boss is right. It doesn't. Just categorically taking not self as a principle is a very bad idea. However, the Buddha also noticed that if you cling to ideas of self, if you think the only true perception of the world is, the only true perception is that I am a being in a world. I have, I'm 5'11" tall. I have a shaved head. I've got robes. I'm sitting here. If you take that to be categorically true, or you imagine it right, my IQ is so and such. I'm good at math. I'm awful at remembering people's names. If you think that's who I really am, then you will never be able to put an end to suffering. You have to be able to see another perspective, and that's where the Four Noble Truths come in. Because and we'll just look at the first three, because the fourth is equivalent to the Noble Eightfold Path. But the first three are not describing self. There is, the first Noble Truth is, there is dukkha. It's just two words in Pali, idang dukkhang. And dukkha is typically translated as suffering, but that's too narrow. Dissatisfaction unsatisfactoriness is better, but at the same time, dukkha also encompasses, just absolute agony. And so there's no single English word that gets everything that dukkha is. So, and the first noble truth is that there is dukkha. It's a fact of experience, which may be obvious, but what's not so what the Buddha's innovation is calling this a noble truth instead of something that you'd rather not deal with. The Buddha said, this is a noble truth, and this noble truth of dukkha should be understood. In other words, we can't, if we want to put an end to dukkha, we have to face dukkha. We cannot imagine a place, if I only do this or go there, then I won't have to face dukkha. Dukkha will just follow you wherever you go. If you don't face it, you're just, that just will not work. You will continue to experience it. And the more unskillful means you use to try to escape dukkha, the more dukkha you will generate. That's just how it works. Idang dukkhang. And so, but again, the reason now there I'm giving a fairly extreme examples of dukkha, but just the unsatisfactoriness of if you're meditating, just the unsatisfactoriness of a mind that won't quite settle, or a mind that's bored with peace. You sit there long enough, and okay, I've been peaceful for 2 hours. I'm bored. That's dukkha. It's very subtle. And this is where the impersonality really matters. Because as long as there is a sense of self there, I'm experiencing this, you'll be, that itself keeps the dukkha there. It's when, this is unpleasant. And that allows the space to see beyond. And the second noble truth is that there's a cause of dukkha, which is craving, and that cause of dukkha is to be abandoned. And here, it's a very helpful distinction about the difference. Dukkha is to be understood. The cause of dukkha is to be abandoned. And so it's very helpful to recognize, to be able to distinguish between what the cause is, because when you experience when you experience craving, that's something you can abandon, you can stop, and that's skillful. Whereas if it falls in the dukkha category, then trying to stop it is escape, and instead it is to be understood, to be stood under, to be experienced. But if it slips into craving, then it's like, nope, check that. So this is subtle, and again, the thing at this level of subtlety, my understanding is that this level of subtlety can be even present with you don't have to imagine a self in a world. The sense of experience, feeling, either pleasant or unpleasant experience, that you don't need that raw feeling doesn't need a self. It's there even if you're not thinking about even if you're not conceiving of a self. And then the inclination, well, actually the I want that craving starts to bring that craving starts to solidify that concept of self. There's a pleasant feeling, and then a conception comes up, that pleasant feeling enhances me, or indicates. In meditation, it's a common trap. You have some pleasant experience, and then I have done this so much. You think, right, this pleasant experience means that I'm a good meditator, and therefore I'm making progress on the path, and I'll be free from suffering in the future. I've done that so many times, and it just, you probably have to make the mistake lots of times before you realize that it doesn't work. It's a mistake. But it is easy, and it's craving. It's very strong craving. And you've slipped out of what was a positive, really helpful practice into fabricating a world that can't be. Because as long as there's a self, it's going to suffer. And so a self that's a good meditator is a self that's going to suffer. And a self that's a bad meditator is going to suffer too. So, and then this cessation of suffering is what happens when that craving is relinquished. When you know it well enough that you recognize right there, oh right, I want this to mean that I'm a good meditator. But I know where that goes. I can't ever be a good meditator. When you know that, then it's like, this this pleasant feeling in meditation, the best thing you can do with it is not let it mean anything. And don't turn it into any meaning. It's a trap. Let it be there. This doesn't mean anything. It's there. It'll change. It has to change. And it doesn't say anything about who I am or what the world is like. There it is. You don't need it. And my experience is the mind can get, it doesn't happen often, but when the mind really gets that, there's a peace. It's like, wow, this is really different. This is different than trying to get a good state of meditation. There's a relinquishment there. And the mind just goes quiet because there's not much to say at all. In a way, there's almost, it's like, well, who would say it? Just, what is, who would say it? What is there to say? Just silence. Can't just. And it's not that the mind is, you're forcing the mind anywhere. It just recognizes, right, if I cling to anything, if there's any clinging, there's suffering. No suffering is nice. That's it. And so that's how the supra-mundane right view works. But this takes, in order to have the mental acuity, in order to be able to do that, well, that takes development. And that's where the Noble Eightfold path comes in. in order to be able to do, in order to be able to have the experiences that I'm mentioning, and I assume that, many other meditators have had much deeper and more continuous, realization of that than me. In order to do that, you need to develop the mind. And the way you develop the mind, we can't, you can't develop the mind if you, in sort of starting from a position of not self. We need to, our ordinary perception is that there's a world and, we have responsibilities in this world, and we need to, and we have a mind, and sometimes it does skillful things and sometimes it does unskillful things, and we need to learn what they are, what's skillful, what's unskillful, and how to encourage the mind to do what brings happiness. And in the beginning, that happiness is, very much in terms of self and other. And that's not problematic. And, what's consistent is not the view. What's consistent is that suffering, you hold whatever view is useful right now, such that suffering decreases and well-being increases. And, one puts in the causes for future cessation of suffering. And so, the view that accords with that is right view, whether it be in terms of self or in terms of not self. And so, this is, I give this reflection primarily for the people who are, the community here is on meditation retreat, which means we have the opportunity to really investigate this, the time and space to do so. But again, people who are not on retreat can pick up whatever parts are useful for them and put them into practice. And so, take what's useful. If you don't understand something, could be what I'm saying is not helpful. Could be that maybe it'll be helpful in the future. Just park it. And again, pick up what's useful. So I offer this for your reflection tonight. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.